We'll give it a few minutes.
All right, we are now live, everybody. So best behavior. I wish we had some like overture music.
All right, we ready to do this? You got your speaker view all figured out, Ryan? We got all our panelists here, almost. We're live on Zoom. We're live on YouTube. I see 17 participants. So why don't we go ahead and get started and do this thing. So welcome everyone to our first CitySpeaks live stream. This is kind of a bizarre thing because I'm sitting in my living room, kind of alone, and I should be in Wells Coffee right now. So that part is sad. But the part that I think is exciting is that we do have technology where we can connect with people and continue to hear stories that are happening in our community. So I guess I could start by saying a little bit what CitySpeaks is about. So it's really about learning how to listen, learning how to have empathy, and learning about other people and learning how to walk in other people's shoes. And so a little bit of context for this specific CitySpeaks. Many of you probably know that back in October of last year, New City Players did a production called Falling by Deanna Gent that was about a family who has a son on the autism spectrum. And we made some great relationships and some great contacts with the autism community. We met so many new people. We learned so much. We had so many things just kind of change in our own lives and our own perspectives broaden. And I know me personally, I was just like greatly affected by the work that we got to do and the people that we got to meet. And so we knew from then on that this would be a part of our company. Integrating the autism community, figuring out how we can make our productions in the future more accessible to people on the spectrum, and doing what we can during Autism Awareness Month to partner with other organizations and also use our own platform to tell some of those stories. So that's what tonight is. This was what this day was always going to be. This is what CitySpeaks this month was always going to be, was about shining a light on autism. And so for those of you who came to the forum last October before Falling, for those of you who came to Falling and saw some of the panelists, you'll probably recognize some of the faces here tonight. We've also got some new friends and new storytellers who are involved tonight as well. So my encouragement to all of you who are at home watching this on YouTube or on Zoom, or we're recording this, so we'll send it out later, who are watching this at a later time, is really just to open your heart, open your ears, open your mind, and listen and receive and have your perspective broadened. And don't be afraid to be challenged. Don't be afraid to change your opinion or your ideas of a topic or of a person because of what you hear tonight. I think what I will miss, obviously, is there's an inherent danger when we're all in the same room together. When storytellers get up there, they're afraid of the people who are there. The people in the room, sometimes we get storytellers who are a little off the wall. The people in the room are nervous or uncomfortable, and we don't really have that right now. I feel the greatest discomfort I have right now is that I'm talking to a tiny camera hole on my MacBook, and I see a few faces at the top of my screen who are smiling. So it's a different kind of uncomfortability. We're missing the danger of being close to each other, but I think the thing that's important is that the stories are still going to be told. And I hope they will still be received by all of you tonight. The last thing I wanted to mention is that, as you know, Wells Coffee is our new home for CitySpeaks, and that's probably why you notice my my background right now. I'm sitting on my couch, and I've got like a weird Marvel hand Iron Man thing going on here, because my background is Wells Coffee. So Ryan had the idea. He was talking to Boaz. They had the idea of kind of like trying to put us in a coffee shop So we get that vibe of where we usually are when we have City Speaks. And the thing that I want to draw your attention to really though is the reason that I have Wells behind me is because that's where we host this event. That's where we are planning on hosting it the rest of the year when we do it later in the year. And they are an amazing coffee company in Fort Lauderdale. Their shop is amazing. Their coffee is amazing. Um, this is what I've been drinking the last few days. I don't know if is it working or is it doing that weird thing where you can't even see. So uh, this is Guatemala, and I think I was telling my wife Samantha this morning or last night. I was like, I think this is it for me. Like I am never buying $4.99 Trader Joe's coffee again to brew in my home. I think I'm gonna just buy Wells Coffee and support them forever because the coffee is so good. It's so much better than the cheaper stuff that you can buy. But they just started a GoFundMe. So this crisis, this pandemic has hit them in a significant way. Obviously, as a coffee shop, creating that third space is what they do, and they just started a GoFundMe that if you go to New City Players link tree, so there's a link in our Twitter bio, there's a link in our Instagram bio, or if you link tree, it's linktr.ee/New City Players. You'll see there it says Wells GoFundMe. Um, they've already raised almost $5,000 in the last 24 hours since they started it. They're trying to raise $25,000 because of lost revenue, and they explain that in the GoFundMe. So we want to shine a light on that as well tonight to support your local businesses who need help. And even if it's $5 or they're still doing takeout delivery stuff, so you can order a bag of coffee and pick it up at the shop with a mask and gloves and doing the whole routine. But we want to support them as well tonight. I hope that as we are all at home again, that we can open our hearts, open our minds, and enjoy the stories that are being told. I think just because we are separate from one another, it doesn't mean that we don't need and require stories to nourish our souls. And I think when we come out of this, there is going to be pain. There's already been pain. For whatever reason, the universe seems to be constructed in a way where out of great suffering comes great meaning. I hope that that is what's on the horizon for us as a culture and as a society. And I think doing things like this in the midst of it, these storytellers are brave and courageous for doing that. And we're so thankful to them for doing that. But I think we have to keep telling stories no matter what. It's what we long for. It's what our souls long for as human beings. It's what we attach our lives to as narratives. It's what gives us meaning. And so I'm going to stop babbling and I'm going to introduce our first storyteller. So again, thank you for being here tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Galen Chun for our first story of the evening.
Hi, can everybody hear me? All right, good. So, hi, I'm a clinical psychologist who's been specializing in autism since 2001. But really, what I guess you could say I've been specializing in it since birth, because I've been really exposed by a lot of families. So I want to start at the beginning though. We are all born crying and afraid and uncertain. I think it's the fear that causes babies to cry after transitioning from their mothers. We often, babies typically, get some comfort from looking at the gaze of their mother and the voices, that soothing voices of their mother. But we find that lack of eye contact, it was observed in infants later identified with autism as early as 8 months. So the reassurance isn't there. And so when you're not making eye contact with somebody at a very early age, you look at things. And so the research of Ami Klim basically said, they found 8-month-year-olds were looking at objects instead of faces. And so our whole ability to soothe ourselves is really based a lot in this relational kind of model. So there we go. My father was always a mystery to me. Even when I was a child, he played softball, he taught school, he hunted, he was a fisherman, but I always felt he was a comet whose path brought him near, but not close. I would be more understandable. It would be more understandable if he didn't live in the same house. But this is a guy that like was in the same circle as I was, and still it was like this unusual disconnect in that he would often like talk to me about things like sports and other things, but it wasn't with me as much. Um, so in the early days, what I knew about my father was filtered through my mom and through his 12 other siblings, who I met in Oahu, Hawaii, where our family is from. And we would always have this reunion every 5 years. It was the Chun Ohana reunion. Um, Through their talk, I would learn um, that on Sunday morning, December 7th, 1941, my father called his siblings outside to watch an air show um, that was taking place, but their joy soon turned to fear as the plane started shooting at them in strafing runs in their neighborhood. The noise of the gunfire was all around them, and the 13 siblings ran inside and were covered by a bunch of mattresses by the eldest daughter and my grandmother. So this is a pretty traumatic event, and myself being someone who has coped with the world by understanding and with empathy, I started to get a picture of who this man was, who was my father. Um, so they have a souvenir bullet from one of the steps that they pulled out afterwards, and it's kind of like a family heirloom now. Um, so after this, like my uncles and aunties, they would talk about my dad about having this like really uncanny ability to like hear a plane from far away and identify what it was. I'm thinking, hey, this is just a trauma kind of thing. But then I was just still kind of like, I figured, this is really unusual. And meanwhile, my father has a brother, my uncle Ed, who looks a lot like my dad, but they could be actually twins even. But I got along a little bit better. He would talk to me a little bit more. And I felt like I had a little bit more in common with him, even as a child. But again, I would only see them every 5 years. And I was always getting these little insights into the family. Um, so interestingly enough, zooming ahead, um, all 13 of them really became remarkable. I've had my uncle Henry worked on 10 systems of the space shuttle and got it going in the first space shuttle. And I have another uncle who worked for Abbott Laboratories, developed a multiple sclerosis drug, and then all these other kind of accomplished people in the family, but they all married late. And it was very strange that they always married like late, like 45, 50. My uncle Henry, who was in his 80s by the first time he proposed. And it was always unusual to me, why all the delay? But they always married these women that those who did marry would marry women that were very empathetic, like my mom. And so it's really an interesting observation that I had after going to these reunions over and over again. So I've always grown up kind of with my eyes open, really trying to observe and understand and listen and love others. People are fascinating to me. Like I can't tell you how much it was a big thing for me to like actually be able to leave where I grew up because um, I basically my dad went from living and going in the military, living in Alaska to moving to Kentucky and going to school there, and then later moving to the middle of nowhere in Kentucky, which was on a 129-acre farm that was mountains and with plenty of things that he could hunt and fish and no planes or gunfire around. So basically, it was one of those things where I grew up very like isolated, and so being able to get out and understand people was really important for me. Um, so let me find where I'm at here. And so I think my dad at 88, he still talks about hunting doves as a child with a homemade slingshot. Hunting for him was his way of being independent. and feeding himself. Like a couple years prior to the bombing of Pearl Harbor, my grandfather passed, and they were very well off. He owned quite a lot of grocery stores and restaurants and things, and then he passed suddenly. And they kept all 13 together, and so this is a pretty traumatizing kind of thing for them. But so my dad would talk about like hunting with a slingshot that he would make, but he would go into really gory details about what he would do to like kill these animals and whatnot. And it would make even the most accomplished gamesman kind of say like squeamish listening to some of his stories. And I always thought it was unusual how he would bring this up, you know, at the wrong times, like when people were eating and whatnot. Um, so it's always very unusual with my dad. He's always been a character. Um, Everyone who's ever met him is like they remember him. But my dad also never looked anyone in the eyes, including me. Um, Very rarely. Many write this off because he certainly appears more Chinese Hawaiian than anything else. But just picture that image for a second. But that dressed in head to toe camouflaged with a newly cured deer holding it up by the antlers, and there you have my dad. I believe, in my understanding of him, even though this is not something I would ever do, like this is something that I think he did to feel secure and in control of his own destiny. Um, my mom used to be the voice of reason. She was incredibly empathetic, but would often relay information about my dad. Um, in the later years, when he lost his hearing, she was the sole way that preferred method for him communicating through her, because he couldn't really hear. But it was, I think, that he chose not to hear at times. He built our house on a 129-acre farm in the mountains, and when he built it, he didn't. There's this like from one floor to the basement, there was this big rectangular opening. And I was 4 and my sister was 6, and there was no wall put up. And my mom was really freaked out because she was trying to keep us from falling into the basement. But he never really thought about that. And so many years later, my dad's best friend told me, and I'm going to have to do the accent because the guy's a character too. Uh, you know, your dad kept those rattlesnakes in the house in the fish tanks on the floor. I told him you can't keep those rattlesnakes around those kids. And my father responded, well, I told them if they put their hands in there, they would die. I was 4 and my sister was 6. So it's very logical to tell a 4-year-old, hey, don't put your hand in there, you'll die. But it was just kind of some bad judgment on my dad's end. He did well for himself given everything, his deficits, and you know he really certainly is well loved by people where he lives, and he's quite the character. He learned how to interact with people by writing their names in calligraphy and like giving it to them, and he's found his own way. But you know, it's been really, always an interesting thing. I always wondered why I moved to Kentucky from Hawaii, like why do that. Because you know every year it was really kind of painful me growing up in Kentucky, because every year I went to school since I was like school age to my senior year, I was asked, how can you see out your eyes? And real racist kind of crap, and called everything in the book. And so I wasn't a fan of Kentucky, but there were amazing people in Kentucky too. But the overall culture didn't really understand a lot, and I certainly look a little bit more. Maybe some people don't recognize that I'm have Asian in my background, but a lot of people. I was a dead ringer in Kentucky. It stood out when I was younger. Um, so my dad left for all these resources in Kentucky, so he would never run out of food, and I think he liked the quietness of it. So I got him after my mom died in 2018. I got him hearing aids, and I had him put them in, and he was about to be put in a memory care unit because they were concerned about his having dementia, and it turns out he just couldn't hear. And I really it really helped me understand a little bit better about him, because he would shoot these guns without hearing protection. And in a weird way, like the hearing aids, I was never, when my mom was alive, allowed to get them for him because she said he would never wear them. Um, and it's weird. He started wearing them to get out of the place where he was at, and to not be put in the memory care unit. But every now and then, he puts them in every now and then to hear what he wants to hear. So he still is kind of controlling the volume level on the world and the unpredictability of everything. Um, but it's his way to do that, and I honor that. Whereas my uncle Ed, who helped discover hepatitis B, like in talking to him, um, we came to the conclusion. I was talking to him about my dad. I was talking about autism, specializing in it for all these years, and he says to me, I think I'm autistic." And I was like, "Okay." And so even in his 90s, he was like, "Okay, I understand myself better." He didn't have autism back then, and so being able to really talk about it, and he's telling me about Tai Chi and how, like, he always gets his left and his right mixed up, and he can't do Tai Chi, and but he sought out, his way of dealing with the world was to understand as well. And I think the best that we can hope for is to look at this world that feels so out of control, and use everything we can to be able to make sense of it. So thank you for listening. It is my pleasure to introduce Austin.
I dreaded this moment. All right. Hi, I'm Austin. Okay. So I was in the previous forum, and that was actually a fun experience, and it's an honor to be here again. Thank you, Gil. Thank you, Gil. So I'm 16, and I've been diagnosed with autism around age 3. And it was around like preschool. I think it was when I first noticed that I felt different. I just couldn't tell how, but I knew, but like something inside it just felt different about myself. And then fast forward to 5th grade, and then I think that's when I had the conscious realization I had autism. And also, fair warning, I'm working on speaking from the top of my head. So if I stop at any point, that's just me working on it. So go with the flow. Anyways, so around like 5th grade is when I realized, like, the conscious realization that I had autism. And honestly, I really did not think much of it. And I mean, I've actually never really like viewed autism negatively, like, at all. Like, for myself, I've never hated it. I've just more like taken, oh, it's just a thing inside. It's just a thing that's part of me. Oh, just a couple different things. Oh dear. Oh well. But like, I don't know what to do with it. And I think that, so in 5th grade, I didn't really know how to like socialize, and my efforts in fitting in ended in an utter disaster. And then when I was homeschooled, which was like 6th grade, I started to just think and develop for myself. And then I just sort of like slowly just sort of learned to, like, instead of just basing my thoughts and way of socialization on other people, I gotta accept myself. So after a couple more years, only recently, I think is when I fully accepted that it's just the way I speak, and I guess like that's okay. So anyway, so how does it affect me? So I space out like a lot, and for anyone who has worked with someone, let's say at a young age with autism, they can probably relate. And sometimes it's like they're like in their head, and then you gotta do something to snap them out of it or keep them unfocused. But it's that appealing thing in their head that's like always grabbing their attention. That it's apparently most important thing in the world right now. And it's like it could be just like, for me it's like I have a very active imagination, and it just sort of runs on and on and on. Even in conversation, sometimes I just space out and just think of like what in the conversation's like, or what may happen after, before, or an alternate scenario. It just goes on, and it can just be. It's because like you just think about the world around them and like what it's like and how it is. Though it won't help you when you're in the middle of traffic, when you're walking down traffic. That's a different story for a different time. But anyways, so then when I actually get into conversation, I construct my sentences differently. It's like it sounded like I can get awkward. That's a lot of people, but like it's like to an extent, like a greater extent, because like I immediately think, okay, what's the right thing to say next? And then I spend like the next invaluable 5 seconds thinking about, okay, what's to say next? What's to say next? What's not wrong? And then I don't know what to say, and then the conversation ends like that because I immediately get caught up in myself. And it's like, it's just like a matter of like trusting yourself, which something I am not very good at, but I've been working on. So work in progress. So like you just gotta like leave it, so don't go into the same pitfall I have, and trust when you're like doing something, trust your gut that you know what you're doing, and that you know what the right thing is to do. And I think most of us already do that by now. So all right. And I also have, this was something that actually only appeared like 2-3 years ago, but like I have this obsessive compulsive disorder now. For the first year, initially, we just thought of it as just an anxiety thing. And then later, not symptoms, but like it was consistent. So at this point, it's a matter of OCD. And oh my God, it's really annoying. It's like, because like it's like this like think of it like a dressed up dude in like roundabout table back of the room, it's just like just saying what if, and then you're just like, what if? And then you sort of contemplate, okay, do I be super cautious, or do I just move on my life? And then you're like, okay, what if I don't be cautious? But what if I'm not? But what if I am cautious? And then it's a paradox. And then it's like a paradox spiral from there. God. And like it really depends. And as for what you're OCD about, it shows up in very strange ways. It was like it went from like checking to, for me it was like it went from like first year I had like a huge thing about seeing if like I stepped in dog waste, and that was an entire thing. It's gone now, but like now it's transitioned into other things, such as checking something repeatedly because you are in doubt yourself, or like inspecting things. And then I still have a thing about like, for like all the time I've had OCD, I've had a thing about washing my hands. Well, there's nothing wrong about it now since I'm in need of it, but before it was a problem because like I got eczema, and it was like, I just like, okay, when am I clean? Ugh. So, but like, here's, autism affects everyone in different ways. It's like, I mean, it's kind of weird. It's like, for like, some people don't even, most people don't, when they socialize with them, most people don't even notice they have autism. They're just like, oh, normal kid, whatever. And I think it's just, maybe I just get comfortable, I guess. So, but like when I get nervous, I think that's when like the cracks start to show, and then somebody's like, something's happening. And I mean, again, for a while, I did not accept myself. Actually, that's a contradiction. I mean, I was okay with having autism, but I guess I just didn't accept myself in that I try to sort of socialize with someone, or like, well, not with someone, but like fit in. And yeah. All right. My mom is to the right. She's sort of my emotional support. So here, I'll say hi to her. Say hi.
Hi.
She deserves it, because honestly, without her, I'll not be where I am today. Because like, I think she's basically the person who helped me socially and mentally and spiritually grow to who I am today. And I wouldn't be who I am without her. And even though sometimes I still get a bit annoyed with her and her weird policies, I still love her very much. So, all right. So, what things have I done in spite of having autism? So, I have a advanced yoga teacher certificate. I also have a regular one. I've got it in last year of October. It was very grueling. It was like 7 hours, I think 7-8 hours for like 2 weeks. You had to learn like the poses, how to teach them, and the script. And it was hard, but like, I met a bunch of cool people, and it was great. And now I teach to my peers, classmates, and it's fun. And yeah, I also have a certificate in scuba diving. I've gotten it last year, May. And it's funny. It's like I did the online course, but then I stopped doing it for an entire year, and then I finished it like right before it was about to expire. And then I did the actual course, and then 2 days into it, I sprained my ankle, so I had to wait 2 weeks before I finished it. You can imagine how that went. And then I finished it, and because like being underwater is really fun. I mean, what am I saying? You can go wreck diving, and it's just really fun. Just remember to do not hold your breath, and you'll be fine. So, and I've gotten a black belt in Taekwondo. 2000. I've had it for like 5 years. Well, I've retired from Taekwondo since 2016, but I've had it since 2015. I had to do a pre-test, which, oh dear Lord, it's basically, I think it was 7:00 p.m. to 7:00 a.m. of constant, rigorous physical exercise. You can imagine how that went. One. I'm not talking about it. And then the next test, it was much easier because probably because they don't want the parents seeing their kids get absolutely tortured, unlike last time. So, but it was fun, and I mean, I think Taekwondo, it's also allowed me to develop as a person, and just like mature, and just I think spatial to an extent it's helped me with spatial awareness, so that's fun. And I'm a musician, and okay, I play guitar and bass. I'm in a cover band right now, Coral Swing All Stars, really fun. And I was in another cover band, but we haven't done anything like, I don't know. It's sort of on hiatus right now, but hopefully we'll be back together soon. But it's really fun. It's like you get to like be with a bunch of talented musicians, and you play 4 times a year at a bar, local Funky Biscuit, and you play really hard stuff. Like, I mean, some bands you probably never heard of, but like Dream Theater, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Metallica, like hard musical stuff. And it's a really fun experience. And if all goes well, I think I'll like join a third band soon, an original one, because I auditioned for a Florida band called Beauty Lies, but the coronavirus, but because of the virus, so that's sort of on hiatus right now. So I'm not sure what's gonna happen, but I have my fingers crossed. So, and the music, it's just like I just feel like excited, like I just feel I like get into it, and I just sort of feel it's like I almost feel myself, and it's just so much fun when you like play with a favorite song of yours and you get it down, and you're just like yes, and it's easy. It's even better when you play with your musician friends, so that's also fun. And I've done acting. I've been to a theater camp called Lovewell. Oh my God. Their community is like the most, like one of the most accepting and like amazing, talented like you will ever see. It's like, oh wait, actually, I'm patting my knees out of nervousness, so if you hear that, that's why. So, but anyways, back to the subject. Lovewell is like, it's a group of super talented people from 13 to 18, and they have 3 weeks to make a musical from scratch. And basically they make the school, they make like the music and the script and the stage production, and it's just like it's a hard experience. It's hard, but like they're super welcoming, and like they're like the most talented and kindest people in the world. And even though it did take some time, I felt welcome there myself. It was amazing. So if you have kids that are interested in acting, I'd recommend you go there. Assuming this COVID blows down by then, which I think we all hope it will. So, all right. I guess that's kind of all there is to say. I thank my mom and my parents basically for the helping me develop and grow. And I guess I just like, it's probably a weird thing to say, but I thank the pets. They help me keep me sane, pretty much. So. And I'm just, yeah. Anyways, thank you for having me on this. And next up, I would like to introduce Dr. I hope I pronounced this right, Dr.
Jenny Trocchia.
Dr. Jenny Trocchia. Thanks.
Awesome, Austin. Thank you so much for the introduction. That was an incredible story. I know we can't hear everyone else clapping, but I'll just do a little, not to overwhelm, but yeah, just a little whoop whoop. So today I'm going to share with everyone a story, my story, and actually 5 brief experiences that shaped my journey to presuming competence, my journey to understanding that individuals with autism are understanding so much more than often given credit for. And I hope that this will be as impactful for you as it has been for me. Okay, we're gonna start with experience 1. That way you can sort of gauge it. My first year teaching, I had a favorite student. Actually, I truly loved all my students, but there was something about, let's call him Miguel. So Miguel was 5 years old. He had a label of autism. He had very limited verbal skills, and he was in an inclusive classroom that was not the best learning environment for him. He would sit when he should be standing. He liked to dance in the rain. He was kind and sweet. He struggled with the skills that his peers did effortlessly, drawing lines and circles, cutting and coloring. He would occasionally use utterances to communicate, but few resembled words. He somehow always knew when a friend needed a hug, and in the brief moments when we were actually able to engage and connect, it was magic. I was his only classroom support, and I was only in his classroom for 2 hours a day. And that was only on the days that I wasn't called out to a meeting or to sub for another classroom. Miguel's primary teacher was new as well, and she really, really needed support, and so did Miguel. So I tried to be there as much as I could, even though I had 90 other students on my caseload. One day in the early spring, I was having a particularly rough day. The kind of day only first-year special education teachers really understand. One of those horrible, terrible, no good, very bad days. And I kept it all together until, at the end of the day, I was in Miguel's classroom and a plastic doll was flung across the room with my face breaking its fall. And that was it. I needed a minute. So I looked to the other teacher in the room and she knew with a nod exactly what I needed. I never like to leave a room without some closure. So I announced, I need to get some air. I'll be right back. Before I could finish my sentence, Miguel leapt up from his chair and ran out of the classroom. I sprinted behind him thinking, well, this is weird. He never usually leaves the classroom, but of course he'll choose today, but how odd. So he's running down the classroom and I'm running down behind him panting. He runs out of the building, past the gate, finally stopped directly in the middle of the PE field where he stood smiling. I joined him after a minute panting, very out of breath. I knelt down to his level, so we were eye to eye. Still trying to catch my breath, I placed my hands on his shoulders and I asked him in a desperate, panting sort of way, why on earth would you leave the classroom? Not assuming he would verbally respond. He looked directly at me. He smiled. He took a deep breath. And then he said, air, Toko, air. He then blew in my face ever so gently, and he gave me a hug. Talk about chills. Experience number 2. I'm now in my 5th year of teaching and running a developmentally based school for kids with autism. My fabulous students at this point were all working on goals like regulating their bodies, remaining engaged for up to 10 minutes, motor planning, and purposeful communication skills. Few initiated verbal language, but we had devices so our students could share their basic wants and needs, things like bathroom, yes, no, hungry, thirsty, things like that. I have to say that just because our students were nonverbal, though, did not mean that our classroom was quiet, ever. All my staff, myself included, were constantly narrating what we were doing to pair words with meaningful actions. We were thinking out loud to help the students understand our thinking and rationale. And since everyone learns best through meaningful experiences, we were constantly putting on shows and creating these huge to-dos for the kids. We were familiar with the term presuming competence, and at the time interpreted it to mean that everything said in the room had to be kid-friendly. And we would never say anything in front of one of our students that we wouldn't say in a neurotypical classroom. One day we were in the middle of an over and under obstacle course, which basically means we go over the chairs, we go under the table. And I'll never forget, a staff member leaked a highly inappropriate, yet fairly hysterical joke. I wish I could remember what it was, but what I do remember is that directly after he landed the punchline, all of our students started laughing hysterically, falling over, laughing so hard, all of them. It was remarkable. While usually I would remind the staff member to keep it appropriate, I just looked at them, they looked at me, and we knew in that instant that our students were comprehending far beyond what we could have possibly imagined. So then I started exploring. For example, I would think out loud, I wonder if Pete's mom remembered to pack his lunchbox. And I would watch as Pete, made up name, would run to his cubby, look in his book bag to make sure his lunchbox was there. The closer we watched our students' actions and followed their cues, the more we understood that our students understood everything. Experience 3. The following summer, I hit the books, read the research, and did a deep dive into unconventional communication methods and attended conferences. On the first day of one of the conferences, I ran into one of my most trusted mentors who knew my students, and she was running a model school for kids with autism in New Jersey. I asked if I could run something by her for her input. I told her, look, this might sound nuts, but I think my students are actually really, really, really smart. I just can't figure out how to access what they're thinking on a day-to-day, minute-by-minute basis. I told her about some of the research that I was finding and the approaches that were coming up and how some of them seemed to be really controversial. She stopped in her tracks. She looked around and then she linked her eyes with mine and she whispered, yes, you are correct. I'm not going to whisper the rest because I want to make sure you can hear it, but imagine in a whispered tone. Your students are incredibly smart, so much smarter than anyone gives them credit for. The approaches you're mentioning are highly, highly controversial, but we have found that they can be extremely effective when applied as part of as part of a comprehensive plan. We've been using one in particular for the past couple of years, and it has transformed our school. We have someone on staff who focuses on this area, and she has the majority of our nonverbal students now typing with support, but they're communicating their thoughts, wants, and needs throughout a day. After the conference, I can put you in touch for a consult. I wanted to jump up and down and shout, yes, I knew it, I knew it. But we were whispering and I was a little confused, but I got the hint and at least knew I was in the right direction. Experience 4. Fast forward to the following school year, I was in the middle of the dissertation phase of my PhD program and the director of education at the school. After a great deal of negotiating and persuading and begging and pleading, we received board approval to have a supported typing consultant, Lisa, visit our school from New Jersey for one day. I felt certain this was going to change everything. Finally, the day arrived. We started off with a staff powwow and sort of an overview of the approach. When we provide backwards resistance to a child's wrist or arm, they're able to overcome impulsivity and motor planning challenges. The physical and emotional support allows the students to slow down so they can access what they want to say. The goal is independence, and it's a process. She continued, I want to make sure that everyone knows that I've been doing this for years. So while it might look easy when I do it, it's not necessarily an easy process. It's kind of like playing a guitar. When you can see someone great at it, they do it effortlessly. You think, I can do that. And you can with practice. Then it was time for the fun to begin. My students were about to have a voice and I couldn't wait. We called the first student in to type with Lisa. Within the first 30 minutes, I was holding back ecstatic tears. The student surpassed all of the goals I had planned for him for the year in 20 minutes. He passed all of them, surpassed them. The next student that typed with her typed, I can't talk, but now I can type talk. I never met a person like you. He continued to let us know that he was more interested in politics than what we'd been teaching him. Who knew? Another student excitedly typed the words, I know dumb, I smart, and then he threw himself into his father's arms. The father had just finished explaining to me that he didn't think his son would be a candidate for this approach because he just wasn't smart enough. The final student to type with Lisa was going through a lot at the time. His mother was a lieutenant colonel in the Army and was about to be deployed to Afghanistan. We knew that this was weighing on him, but without a reliable way to communicate with him, we never knew how much he was understanding throughout this transition. When it was his turn to type with Lisa, he sat calmly for over an hour, which was unheard of for him, and he typed, it's not fair that she, meaning mom, is going away. Get the president to get her off the going list, then send his kids away from their mom so she can go fight his fight in faraway places. Tell other people to go, not my mom. The thing is, I think my mom wants to go, and that makes me really sad. Typing's really easy with you. How come I can't type easy with other people in the world? I have never been so happy to be alive. I was in awe. Other than yes, no, and basic one-word responses, I had never known my students' true abilities. Whew, sorry, it's very emotional. I never got to hear their voices until that day. This day shattered everything I thought I knew about autism and everything we did in our classrooms. Final experience 5. I felt so passionate about the topic and so confused as to why to make this topic the focus of my dissertation. Even though I'd been actively working on another topic for 9 months, this was worth it. All I needed was approval from my dissertation committee to make the switch. No big deal, I thought, right? So I created a presentation for them, which I called The Kids Are In There, giving nonverbal autistic students a voice. I laid it all out on the table for the dissertation committee, the remarkable possibilities and the controversy. They were hesitant and they hated that there was controversy associated with it. So they encouraged me to stick with my current topic. I pulled out videotape footage of my students typing with Lisa. They knew I wasn't giving up. Hesitantly, they approved a 1-year exploration of the topic. After a year, they said, bring us your research. And if it's strong enough, if your proposal is strong enough, there are no promises, but we'll see after a year. You have 1 year. I left leaping for joy and I thought, I've got this. I can totally do this. So I pursued the topic for a year, a full year. I learned, I read, I consulted with experts, I attended conferences. I drafted a 62-page literature review and submitted 7 strong research proposals to my dissertation committee. One by one, each and every proposal was rejected. At my final rejection, they admitted, "Your research is extremely impressive. It's just too controversial for the university to be associated with." I was devastated. I realized that if I wanted to finish my PhD program and get the degree, I had to switch the topic of my dissertation altogether. The only way I could find the strength to start over with a new topic was to vow that I would pursue research and advocacy for this approach and the presumption of competence further after the degree. Since then, I have certainly spread the message of presuming competence in everything I do, but spreading the word about this approach was much more difficult than I had anticipated, especially after I left the school and went out on my own. The controversy and feelings behind it are strong and heated. That being said, I can't help but feel that today, tonight, in this moment, I'm fulfilling a part of that vow by sharing this story, my story, and the story of my students with all of you tonight. So thank you so much for listening. And with that, thank you. I am so honored to present the next presenter, the next speaker, who is also one of my former students, Derek Bailey, also known as Bite Dr. Derek. Woohoo!
Yes, hello, hi. Sorry about that. Jen, I didn't know that you were gonna make us cry. So thank you all for having us here. This is Derek. And so for Derek's story, we figured since Derek is non-speaking, he does, however, communicate by typing, thanks to Jenny. We figured the best way for him to tell his story is if we played a podcast that he was just recently featured on. And I think if anybody has any questions about him or for him at some point or later, you can easily contact him on any social media at Bike Dr. Derek, and you can shoot us a message. But we'll play the podcast now, and we'll say a brief goodbye when it's over, I guess. Thank you for having us.
Sometimes it's really hard to see what you have in common with other people. Other times, it's remarkably easy. When I first saw Derek's feed on Instagram, I didn't see somebody with autism. I didn't know that he uses a computer to talk sometimes. And I didn't know that he struggles with epilepsy. All I saw was somebody who also loves fixing bicycles. So for this story, join Derek and Derek's parents as we find out how a young man named Derek became Bike Dr. Derek.
What is it about bicycles that drew you in and made you want to work with them?
I think bicycles are very soothing. They are the essence of simplicity. Anyone can ride one and get to another location.
Hi, my name is Minerva Santiago. I'm from Pembroke Pines, Florida. I have a son. His name is Derek. Derek is currently 18 years old. At probably around 24 months, Derek was diagnosed with autism. He is non-speaking. He is able to communicate by typing. And when he turned 12, he started having seizures. Since then, he's been diagnosed with epilepsy as well. Probably during his teenage years, we became more concerned about Derek as far as his future and what he'd be doing for a living and where he would live and all of those things that I think most special needs parents kind of concern themselves with. And at that point, based on Derek's condition and the employment opportunities that were available, we talked with him and decided that self-employment was probably the best way for him. However, we had no idea what could be something that he would do for a living. We offered many suggestions. Unfortunately, when we were offering those suggestions, we didn't seek Derek's insight or feedback until finally he brought it to our attention that we were all wrong, and his interest was in bicycles. He wanted to learn how to repair bicycles.
What do you find most enjoyable about working on bikes?
On more days than not, really think it is most enjoyable to work with parts like the ones that spin. They fascinate me, like puzzle pieces, how they go together.
For a lot of people, even for people who are familiar with autism, autism is a mystery. You don't understand everything about autism. You know, there's a saying that goes, if you meet one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Derek, I guess, exhibits himself in ways where he understands that people view him as having very little abilities. So there's that aspect of autism that if you just look at what's on the outside and the behaviors that are exhibited, you are led to assume that someone like Derek is not capable of doing much. When we gave him like a first bike repair lessons initially, which were just here at the house, it was just some lessons that we had downloaded off of the internet. When we realized that he was capable of doing more than that, that's when we sought out a bicycle mechanic to help us take this to the next level. Derek is a visual learner, and at times he may get distracted and he may need to get redirected, and all you have to do is really point back to his checklist and he'll pick up where he left off. But that's an accommodation that he needs, and as long as you understand how the individual can learn, you can pretty much turn anything, I mean, any interest that any individual is interested in, perhaps, and they want to learn to do it for a living like Derek has. I think you can certainly teach them how to do it if it's presented in the right way. The bike mechanic, his name is Jeff Thorkelson, and he has a nonprofit organization called Recyclable Bicycle Exchange. And so he has plenty of bicycles for you to work on. So as far as the name of the business, Bike Dr. Derek, that was Derek's choice. We consulted with him and asked him what he wanted the business to be called, and he figured because he was going to be repairing something and he feels like he's helping other people, he chose the doctor aspect of it. And Derek's been very much involved with every decision that we make about the business. Not about us or the pace that we feel the business should go at. This is Derek's business, and therefore he should determine pretty much everything about the business.
What is your favorite part about working with customers?
I think my favorite thing is that I get to meet people that might think that everyone with autism is not smart. In this hard job, you get to show them that you are just the same as everyone else. I think everyone really thinks that after our time together. That helps to teach others that think people with autism might not be thinking for themselves.
Hi, my name is Boaz Nelson Santiago. I am Derek's stepdad and very, very proud stepdad at that. So when I see Derek working on a bicycle, I forget about autism. When I see him working on a bicycle, I forget about his disabilities. I forget about his epilepsy. What I see is a young entrepreneur, a bike mechanic like every other bike mechanic I've seen. What we're really trying to do is establish a presence in Derek's life so that he can be his own advocate. Instead of parents always having to be the advocate for the children, I think people will begin to listen, and I think the message is stronger when Derek can advocate for himself. And I think that the business is an advocate for his abilities. I also think it's an advocate for the entire community. What we're hoping will be accomplished by way of his business is that he can stand on his own 2 feet and not need mom and dad to advocate for him, but that he can advocate for himself.
How do you see your bicycle business impacting your future?
The future is not certain. God is the only one that knows.
So that was Derek's story. Thanks so much for joining us. As you can see, Derek likes to see himself in the screen. Therefore, he's very amused. He likes the setup. But thank you again so much for having us. We really appreciate it. And thanks to New City Players, and thank you to Jenny. If it was for Jenny and her believing in our kids, Derek wouldn't have a voice today. So we would now like to introduce you to our next guest, which is Rachel Maroff.
Thank you very much, Minerva. Thanks, Derek. It is, I don't know. So again, my name is Rachel Maroff, and I have been in and out of the autism world for about 20 years now. And it's perfect me coming after Jenny and then Derek and their stories and examples of presuming competence. My story is called, it has its own name. It's Beyond ABA. ABA stands for Applied Behavior Analysis, and in many circles, but not all circles, it is considered the quote unquote gold standard therapy or treatment or way of teaching autistic people. 20 years ago, I was a student at Washington University in St. Louis and got an email from a professor looking for college students who want to make 10 bucks an hour working with autistic kids. And 10 bucks an hour sounded great in college. And I think for most of us right now, $10 still sounds pretty good right now because at least it's working. And I consider myself incredibly lucky that when I started doing ABA as a therapist, I found an amazing family and I had an amazing mentor that I worked with. I worked with a 2.5-year-old. She was just absolutely adorable. She's a full-grown adult now. And we did everything. Everything was fun. It was natural. It wasn't repetitive. And my mentor taught me, not explicitly, but he taught me to always respect the fact that the kids we were working with are little human beings. They might be small. They might not speak. They might do all kinds of things that seem different, but they're still human beings. And he didn't use the term presuming competence, but I realized years later, I think it was almost 17 years later when I heard that term, that was what I had been doing the whole time. That was how I had been working. But I found out pretty quickly that that's not a standard approach in the behavior field. And I ended up being the black sheep in therapy. My mentor trained me a certain way, and then I worked how he worked, and it was wonderful. I feel like I had a really big impact on people's lives, but I never felt like I fit in the field. I even one time, it's kind of one of my stories, like some of Jenny's, a family brought me in as an undercover consultant. So at that time I was beginning to work as a consultant, and she was concerned that her son's program wasn't really living up to what it should be. So I went in and I was looking through the program book, and he was 3.5. He was learning his letters. And the consultant on the case and in the program book was very explicit that he was only to be exposed to 3 letters a week, because any alphabet puzzle with all 26 letters, because it's a set and it doesn't work well with only 3 letters unless you're doing binary code. And he knew his entire alphabet, but nobody had challenged him. Nobody had pushed him. And my mentor had always shown me if you have high expectations, the people around you can reach those expectations. If you have low expectations, you'll never see where they can go. I, for a brief period of time, worked with the school district in St. Louis. Before I'd only worked with little kids. And then with the school district, I was asked to sit with an 8-year-old and do 1, 2, 3 story sequencing. And I thought, doesn't really seem like an 8-year-old kind of thing, but it's what's in the program book, I'll try it. But then they told me that he needed to practice taking his coat on and off and zipping it up. Not when it was time to go out to recess, but he had to practice it when it wasn't recess time. And that if he didn't practice it, I was to physically assist him until he did, even though that was against the rules in the district. And within a week, I quit my job and I went off on my own because it wasn't right. First of all, the kid was my size. I don't know how I'm supposed to physically assist a 9-year-old who's the same size as me to put on something. Why would he put his coat on? He wasn't going out. I worked on my own for many years, but I was still the black sheep in the community because I treated little kids like little kids, and the kids liked me. And eventually I left the field because I was tired of fighting with other professionals. Fast forward like 10 years, and I would touch into the autism world here and there. And about 5 years ago, I came back. I missed it. I always missed it. I missed the kids, missed the families. I didn't necessarily miss all the other professionals, but until I met Jenny. Thank you, Jenny. I started off with play therapy. And through play therapy, I came across one of those controversial methods that was also mentioned by Jenny. And it was RPM, which is rapid prompting method. It's different from the supported typing, but it's an approach that helps people who cannot speak their minds the way they want to, who can't control their bodies to get their words out. And at first, the behavior analyst in me, because I still believed in ABA. I believed that ABA, if done the right way, if done with respect, if done in a fun way, was still an amazing thing. And they just needed to learn more about it. So but ABA is all about data. You want to see data on everything. And if you can't record it and you can't measure it, it doesn't count. So I was a little skeptical. And then I started to see how it changed the people. And I realized that for the years and years I had worked with autistic people, even though I had a feeling that there was something intangible, something I couldn't measure, there wasn't data on it, I couldn't check it off on a list and put it on a graph, I found what it was. And it was the inability to really support the people I was working with to fully express themselves. If we cannot communicate what we are thinking and feeling in a way that others can understand, and that's the key, because behavior is communication. The things we do is communication. But for some people, then there's research behind this now showing it, there are some autistic people that have major motor planning problems. They might think, I want to hug you because I love you, but that might turn into them running past you and shoulder checking you. Or maybe they know they want to do this thing, but it doesn't work out the right way. And even though so many things they do might look natural and purposeful, it's not necessarily exemplary of what they are thinking and feeling. And I never liked ABA for teaching language. It can teach vocabulary, but it didn't make sense to teach when somebody says this, you say that. We don't communicate that way. To really communicate, you have to be natural. It is great if somebody can tell you, I'm hungry, I want to eat this, I need to go to the bathroom. Basic wants and needs are huge, but they only get you so far. And so when I was in ABA, I only worked with little children. I only worked with kids under the age of 5 because I could not figure out how to take what I was doing and make it make sense for older kids until I came across these other approaches. And I went to a conference. It was my turning point, similar to, again, Jenny and I have very parallel stories. And it was a hard weekend because I realized I had been out of the field for 8-9 years at that point. And I thought of all the years that I had lost, that I wasn't helping people in a way that most people don't know about. I had lost, and even with the students I worked with, I know I always respected them. I know I always treated them well, but I also realized at that point that I did not equip them to fully express themselves. And I realized as I got further down the road, so I started off by, my turn came as I started listening to people who were learning from autistic people. And then I started learning from autistic people too in a more direct way, because the only autism experts are autistic people. And I have gone from being a standard, and I was never a standard behavior therapist, but I went from ABA, I went from sitting down in a room, controlling everything that kid liked. In ABA, the therapist oh, you like this thing? Well, I'm going to hold it until you do what I want you to. And it can be done in nice looking ways. But I realized that I was training them to require other people to be in charge of what they were doing. And it takes away a lot of who they are as a person. And many autistic people feel this way. And I went from being ABA can be amazing if we just make it friendly enough and natural enough, to realizing that when people are successful in helping and supporting autistic people, it's because they're good teachers. Anybody who's a good teacher can break things down into smaller tasks. They can find ways to make it purposeful and make it work. And I've now shifted from behavior therapist to radical support, working towards always being an ally to actually autistic people and what they do. I now support people in finding ways to get their communication across, to talking about presuming competence, because nobody wants to be treated like a little kid. Nobody wants to be treated like they don't understand what's going on. Deaf people complain when somebody comes up and starts doing that. It's not my computer, that's people talk to them. They're deaf. That doesn't help. Nobody likes nobody likes being mansplained. Nobody likes being told, oh, you don't know what you're doing. And if we look at autism as being more of a sensory issue, being a motor issue, and we realize that what we see cannot tell us what else is going on unless we find ways to help them get it out. And it was the weekend I had my turning point was really hard for me. I felt like I let people down. I felt like I had missed so much. And I also felt like I had so much to learn, because I just realized there was there were words for the things that I believed in. There were words for presuming competence. There are real motor challenges. There are real sensory challenges. And there are people out there who want to explain it. And I'm so happy that we have actually autistic people on the panel tonight, and that New City Players has always done such a good job at learning from and incorporating it. Because like Austin was saying before, it's about acceptance. Everybody's aware of autism. I haven't met anybody who's never said, oh, I've never heard of autism. What is it? But what they think it is, and how they treat people who are autistic, that's where it really becomes an issue of personhood. It becomes an issue of giving people their rights to have a choice over their own lives, like Derek has been able to find, because he can tell us what he wants. He can communicate that. And that's life-changing. It's absolutely life-changing. And it was life-changing for me getting to that point of support. And I'm happy, very, very happy that I can do it now. And that there are other professionals who get it too, and we can all be rebels together. So, thank you very much for having me. And I would now love to hand it over to Joe Lamia. I hope I pronounced your last name right.
No, you did. You got it right. Usually people don't get it right the first time. So congratulations. No. Hi, everybody. This is my first time with the New City Players doing one of these things. Actually, I was recommended this to Amy, who's watching right now. I've been telling her about my story for a while, and she recommended me to come on here, so I thank her for that. So I was diagnosed when I was 3 on the autism spectrum. The way my parents found out was I was watching an episode of Jeopardy, and the Daily Double sound came on, and I freaked out so much, apparently from what my parents told me, that I ran out of the room screaming. And they were thinking to themselves, like, why is he screaming like this? Like, a normal person wouldn't do that when they hear the Daily Double thing. They would actually get excited. But no, it was the other opposite. It was the opposite. Just the sound. It's like one of the signs of autism is like the sensitivity of the 5 senses. Or even in a lot of cases, like you don't feel anything. But that's how they found out about it. And when I got diagnosed at 3, they also noticed that I was speaking half English, half gibberish. So I wouldn't be able to form coherent sentences. So when I got into preschool, they got me into speech therapy, and I did speech therapy all the way until elementary school. And I would get the way that I personally found out about it, because my parents didn't tell me, was I got pulled out of class one day and they said, "Oh, you're going to a special class." They didn't call it autism. They called it a special class, because this was back in 95. So back in the 90s, it was not a very popular thing to say, because there were all these hit pieces back then about autism being like a curse, and that the parents were like martyrs. And if you had it, then you were considered like a disdain on the family or whatever it was. Even my parents didn't call it that. The only people they told were close family members and some very close friends, and they didn't bother telling anyone else. So that was one of the things that I was also told growing up, was don't ever mention it. Don't talk about it. Don't say anything about it. Just tell people that you're a normal person that just doesn't like to talk. That was the story growing up. Getting into elementary, when it got to middle school, it was apparent that I couldn't be in a public environment anymore. I was just too stressed out. So much pressure was put on me to try to be like an A+ student. And it was just very tough to try to keep up with all of the honors classes that they ended up putting me in. I was in honors math. I was in honors English, when I shouldn't have been. I excelled at math because I had great tutors, but it was too much to handle. And my mother always had a thing of like, okay, you got to get those A's, because then if you don't, then you're not going to get a good career for yourself. Not fully understanding, and I don't think they still don't understand to this day, that a lot of the different things that I go through in terms of trying to understand and learn things is very different than the way that they used to learn things. Not very what's the word? Not very empathetic to my situation. I mean, they were empathetic in other ways, but not necessarily when it came to learning. So also around that same time, my parents ended up separating when I was a teenager. And I thought to myself, am I to blame for this because of all the stuff that they had to do for me on a level of trying to get me extra help? Because I have older siblings. I'm the youngest of three, but we're all 10 years apart. So I'm thinking to myself, they didn't go through this with my brother. They didn't go through this with my sister. They were pretty happily married. So now that I come along and now they get separated, am I to blame for this? Because then I also was reading at the time that there's like this myth out there that about 80% of people, 80% of couples end up getting divorced because they have like kids on the spectrum. And I know that to be false, because there's no evidence to support that. But that was going through my head. And of course, they always try to tell me, no, it's not your fault. But they didn't do it in a way that was very convincing. So I kept believing that and believing that. And, they got back together about a year later, but the damage had already been done. It's still something that still bothers me to this day, even though I know that not to be the case anymore. But, it's just that trauma back then was really, really tough. And high school definitely wasn't even better. I mean, they had to take me out of public school, and they had to put me into a very strict religious school, because there were no other private schools in the area. And back then there was really no autism schools like we have now. And there was not really anything that was affordable even for my family at the time. So they had to put me in a very strict place where there was no empathy for autistic people whatsoever. I mean, I only had one friend in there that was on the spectrum that they introduced me to, thinking that that would satisfy me. But him and I both said to each other, no, this is not right. Something's not right here. So eventually, and that's the thing, is like, I have friends on the spectrum, but we don't actually ever talk about it. Like, it's kind of like a thing, like we know it to be the case, like we know we have it, we just don't go into like any deep details about it. We're kind of ashamed to talk about it, in a sense, amongst each other. And that's kind of gone along the same lines, because we've always been taught, don't talk about it. Even when it came to us getting into dating when we were teenagers, like our parents would always say, don't tell them they have it, because I was told that a woman would never love me for the sake of that ever being the case. Like if they came out and said that, that would be it. It would be off the table at that point. So it was kind of a blow because I'm thinking I can't express myself in any way, shape, or form. I have to just completely hide everything and not at any point just try to at least tell somebody about it without getting judged or without feeling like I'm not a part of, or I can't be a part of anybody's life at that case. And as I got into my adult years, it definitely was also a struggle because I kept that mentality for a very long time. I was told that when I was 15, and by the time I turned 25, that's when I started turning things around for myself. I started to say like, I can't just keep, I just can't keep listening to my folks because I don't think they're ever going to understand because I mean, I don't see, I see other parents and they're so much better with their kids than when my parents were. I mean, even to this day, like they're in the other room right now and they're just busy watching Netflix and they don't care that I'm even doing this right now. But it was something that was like, okay, I got to do something by myself because there's no way that if I ever try to get help from anybody else, I don't think they would ever understood. That's the mindset that I went in going into it. So it took a while for me to actually open up. And the way I did it was I started doing entertainment. I started performing. I did improv. I did stand up. I did theater. And I come from an entertainment family. The gene is in my blood. I grew up with a family of opera singers, dancers, singers, Shakespearean actors. So by that time, I knew that I had the gene in me. I just had to get it out some way. And then after I started to dabble a little bit into improv and other stuff, then I started podcasting. So this is why I have the podcast mic right now. So I did a podcast for about 3 years. And in my first 5 months, I ended up getting about 1,000 subscribers. I had tens of thousands of people listening to my show. And it was just me telling a story for like an hour and a half of like about something that was very popular on the internet. So, and I had a few friends that would just laugh at the way that I did the voices and the way that I told the story. And it was just like the little peanut gallery. So that was very fun times. And we would go live with like something like this, and we would do this for like an hour and a half. So as I started building up more and more of myself, trying to build that up and trying to get myself into a place where I felt comfortable speaking more about autism, that's when I started coming out, so to speak, and really just telling people about it, whether it was on Facebook or whether it was on Instagram. I mean, right now I'm doing like all my posts right now on Instagram are all about different ways of how people can start being more accepting rather than just talking about awareness. Because people can be aware, but they could be totally hateful. I mean, I'm an example of that. So also I decided not to wear blue anymore because blue is also like a very hateful color in terms of that, because red was it hashtag red instead. I found that that is something that I know is a very popular thing amongst the acceptance part of autism right now. And I'm trying to do a little bit more research as time goes on. Like I know not to get involved in Autism Speaks because they're just like a company that is just looking out for profit rather than trying to help people out, as I've seen. There's many examples that I can pull up and I can send links, and there'll be like horror stories. But eventually I also got into CrossFit. So I found more of my passions, trying to get myself into better shape and trying to show people at least that way. What happens when you have passions like where you're so laser focused on them. I can now like back squat 300 pounds. So that is, yeah, yeah, no, not many people can believe that, but yes, I have video to prove it. But it's just all those things where now I'm trying to build myself up, just me, and just try to at least share it as much as people as possible. And I just like to say that it's something that I know that it's tough for everybody's got a different story when it comes to being on the spectrum and knowing how you got to this certain point in life. But I always say to people, like, each story is important, and it is something that will benefit anybody, whether they're trying to learn or they want to at least get to know you better. I mean, there's only one person that I know in my life that has said, I want to know more about what you go through, what your signs are, what your different symptoms are. Well, not symptoms, but what your different things are. I actually want to know more about you. And she's my best friend to this day, and I will love her for the rest of my life. But other than that, yeah, that's my journey so far, and I plan to keep going further more into this journey, and I'm gonna keep putting my voice out there because that's the only thing I know how to do it. So thank you guys so much, and I now want to introduce Jairus Evans to the stage so that he can share his story.
Really appreciate you, Joe. I actually appreciate you all beyond belief, having an opportunity to sit here and listen to all of the unique stories abroad. It's, I got to honestly say, heartwarming. It's like talking to family. Um, my story in general, as a whole, it's probably a compilation of all of yours. I wish almost that we can all kind of sit here every night and talk about things like this, because I know for a fact, like kind of Joe said, and all of you all have kind of said to an extent, that there are a lot of naive and uneducated people out there about autism in general. And if everybody were really educated enough when it came to it, I think we would see a lot less challenges and problems that take place with our kids, and also anybody that is grown that is running into challenges when it comes to autism, any form of special needs. And I just, with mine, I guess my story, that I like I was kind of saying to everybody, at our meeting, our private meeting, I loved it. Was that I was unsure of what direction I really wanted to take. And I guess after a pretty good talk with my awesome wife, Ms. Betsy Jermaine Evans, I actually want to stop. I'm going to take kind of what Dr. Jenny did and make a few stops, and try to close this out as quickly as possible, and in respect for everybody, so we can get back to our lives and get back to loving each other and hopefully making this world better, like Joe said. First thing I want to say is that for myself, it took me my first couple of years of my eldest daughter's life, and to kind of put a fast forward on the button of that, I have a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old that's about to be 6. In a few days, she's been telling us that every single day of life for the last like 30 days. So she's about to be 6, and we have identical twin girls. So I have a queendom amongst myself. Leading the charge is our superstar, and the glue that probably holds everything together is Aaliyah. Aaliyah is definitely on the spectrum. And I kind of almost kind of say proudly on the spectrum. Aaliyah is a great example of how my life and how I was raised, which isn't a terrible thing. The great thing about it was I was raised to be very confident, very motivated, and to be inspirational and chase every dream possible down that I'd like to attain. As a kid, for myself, working hard to get all the way to the NFL, and it took me, like my mother said, 15 years to get there. I want everybody to understand it, at least on the level, and for me with this, all of the hard work that I put in to make it to the NFL, to make it out of high school at Nova, to Missouri Western, to the Chicago Bears and New York Jets, I could assure you and I could tell you this, that was easy compared to my day-to-day life with my eldest daughter, Aaliyah. That was easy. It was easy. And anybody that want to challenge that theory, they can feel free to reach out, and I can give them thousands of examples of why that was easy. And I say that in a very positive form. The reason why I say that is Aaliyah helped me become not just a better man in general. I always thought of myself as a very loving and very diversified and unified human being. And I always have been that. But she is me. I never thought I could have been better than what she has brought to light for me. The first couple of years of her life, long story short, I was in denial up until the age of about 2.5, 3. And my mom, my wife, she convinced me to go with her to the doctor. And that's when I really had my first experience with learning about not just the field and life of autism, but learning more about my daughter. Because for me, it was kind of the more motivated aspect. Like, no, if you keep repeating this to her, she'll get it. She'll get it. Everything's just gonna go all right. She's just gonna get it, you know. And that's an old, respectfully stated, country or city thought and aspect it was naive in itself. And I'm glad I took a more followers approach with my wife, and I started to really learn about it. And what I came to find is, if anybody, and might be too wide of a spread of a thought of an example, the movie Blade, like the very first one, like it's like this underground world, you know, it's hidden from everybody. And I won't lie, I feel like with being on the spectrum, I feel like I'm a part of it. It's awesome, you know, like nobody else knows about it. And it's like this private world of where we can live together and we can learn together and really expand in all aspects of life without the interferences of what's going on out there in the light, you know. Because I guess in a unique way to the movie, I didn't really think a lot of people would understand Aaliyah. And it took a lot for me to kind of take a back seat and really own the learning aspects of what challenges she was having just as in just being on the spectrum. And I'll give you just these few examples without even a story. When Aaliyah first went in elementary school, long story short, we had to change her school 3 times because the moment my wife picked up on the fact that she wasn't getting the respect and or the love that all children on the spectrum should get, she snatched her out of school quick as you can blink your eyes. And at first, I won't lie, with me being and you're talking to somebody that's in the educational field by day. So for me, I was like, what are you doing? You're not giving them a chance to really get to know her, you know? But she was so detailed on her approach. She's that parent that if she had to come and call your school every single day, she'll come to your school, call your school every single day. And the necessary reason was she don't want to be mean about it, but she wanted to be very direct in what she expected, you know, in the fair nature of, you know, with dealing with Aaliyah. And I'm glad that she ended up with moving forward 2 schools. I can't thank enough, Baldwin and Davie, and you know, SFAX and Miami Lakes. Incredible, at least when it comes to Aaliyah. You know, I know all schools don't work for all students, but I will tell you this: somehow they found a way to really motivate her in ways that even we run into challenges on. Fast forward to the next stop. When I ended up going to a movie theater that was not movie theater, excuse me, a movie viewing that was set up specifically for children with special needs. And when I went into the theater, you know, the kids were kind of running all over the place and the parents kind of, you know, hanging tough and relaxing, and it was quite noisy. And the biggest challenge for me is once the movie came on, the movie was actually quite low. And I thought something was wrong. You know, I was like, you know, all this kind of mayhem going on. I get it, kids on the spectrum, but you know, we need to kind of see some kind of control in here. And so I decided to get out of my seat and go to management in the front. And I said, hey, could you do me a favor? Movie's amazing. We loving it, you know, because I'm big on customer service and how I approach people. And I said, could you please turn the volume up? And manager said, well, sir, we can't turn the volume up. I said, well, ma'am, all you have to do is just turn it to the right. If you turn it to the right, it'll probably go up and then everybody in the movie theater can hear it, you know, because I'm having a hard time hearing the movie. And the manager politely said, sir, the movie that you went to see, respectfully stated, I got to be honest with you, it's not about you. It's not about you at all. If just take a moment, go back in the theater, you have a seat to enjoy the movie, and you'll get what I'm saying. And at first I'm like, lady, listen, I'm not asking you for that. Just turn the volume up, you know? And then I kind of thought about it. I said, you know what? I'm going to take her advice. So I went back into the movie theater. I sat down, and it maybe took me, I'll be honest, maybe about a minute or two. And what I realized was that I was the only uncomfortable person in the theater. My daughter, her sister, Ariana, they were comfortable. All of the kids and they were comfortable, the other parents. And in a very strange way, in about a minute and a half and 2 minutes, I didn't hear anything except for the movie. You know, it's weird. Like, I don't know if it just brought me into the world and I gained magical powers or something like that. Lord knows, I don't know, but it worked, you know, and the lady was right. And fast forward to my last story and stop before closing out. We took a trip as a family to Washington, D.C., and we were viewing or going on a tour of one of the museums. And every day, that's why I said, is a new challenge when it comes to Aaliyah, because she teaches me so much more about when it comes to unique communication styles. And there was a baby that was crying. And what most people don't know about, at least my daughter on the spectrum, is it doesn't matter your age. If you are crying, she is going to cry profusely. She loves people. She doesn't like to see anybody in pain. And I initially didn't get it, you know, in the beginning. And at first, me, it was just like, be quiet, you know, you don't need to talk and this, and don't let it bother you. And until one day, me and my wife really kind of sat back and looked, and she had long figured it out, but she was like, you know, I need you to get back to your humble side and really take a look at what's going on with her. And what happened was, I'm going to assume the person that was in line, that she seemed to be fairly educated, but she kept kind of giving a look back. And I never would have thought that she would have said anything, but eventually on the tour, we made a stop and it was so quiet. And she had basically said, you know, kind of something more in the regards of, can you all quiet her down, you know? And before I could even blink, my wife is off the mute button. She does not play when it comes to that. And she read that lady her rights. I almost took out my notebook, writing down notes. Man, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that. Oh, that's much. Okay, man, you incredible. Wow, all of this is what I'm using next time. What she basically told her was, and there was no profanity used at all, I'll be honest. But and that's where you really kill people softly at the right way. My wife basically told her in a nutshell, before you jump to conclusions, as people in general, you need to think before you say things. You know, my daughter just happens to be on the spectrum. The lady immediately, obviously educated, she got it at that time, but it was too late. The lion was off the leash. So if you, and once my wife realized that, oh, she was in her soul. Respectfully stated, please do better moving forward in every case when you cross other kids and other people. Before you jump your gun, you know, getting mad. Why is this kid crying like this? Why is this person screaming and yelling like this? Why is this person falling all over the place like that? There are reasons behind it. And sometimes there are positive reasons, if not all. They're communication variations. That's it. And if you get it, and if all that lady had to do, and what the lady didn't even realize was, she was the triggering point for Aaliyah. Because if you give Aaliyah that attention while someone is crying, and you give a look in the aspect, kind of like me, if I pull off my hat and I'm like, oh man, this isn't good, Aaliyah knows it's bad. She knows that that person is hurting, and you're not going to get her to stop crying from that. Everybody in the room literally got to just come to a toe and kind of be like, hey, listen, everything is good. It's okay. You know, it's all right. Everything gonna be okay. And miraculously, like in any other case, I'll be honest with you, it never fails. Aaliyah calms down, you know. So with that being said, maybe I can get this out and we can close this out. I'll just close with a poem, and it's called Wonder World, and it is about my eldest daughter, Aaliyah. And as a matter of fact, anybody in existence and or has ever existed with autism and or on the spectrum with any form of special needs. So y'all forgive me if I stumble through this. Being in hibernation has me readjusting my performance style. So this one's an emotional one for me. So I'll get out as much as I can. I'll say that. Thank you all for having me. That being said, it is the survival of the fittest. That is what I consistently tell them. My wife and children, that is, especially my eldest daughter, who endlessly have people hunting her diagnosis of autism on the spectrum like one of those mysterious creatures that haunted A Quiet Place. But just like the united family of the Abbotts, she is never alone. You see, in our household, the threshold we must consistently and exceed and overcome as a family far beyond the faith we have in our prayers every sunrise and sunset is to keep an elite level of respect in mind for how silence is the ultimate weapon of power. Like Charles de Gaulle said, we can see and hear them all out though. The creatures. I meant the chilling whispers and heinous actions from the many uneducated people who don't really understand how it works when it comes to autism, who only hunt down random explosive sounds and emotional reactions like mindless animals or monsters without a conscience, who only focused on feeding on my child, like any of these other folks out there with their reckless comments or actions against them. I had to take some form of poetic action and help prevent this type of nonsense from continuing. Conquered my personal denials, and yep, I think that's about all of it that I remember. Yeah, so with that being said, what it basically says, oh, thank y'all so much. See the love there? I love that, man. How about this? I'll even say this in closing of it. The nutshell of it all is this: children and people with special needs, they need to be treated with the same respect as anybody else. That's the nutshell to it all. Don't tell me anything different. When you show me a human being out here that bleeds different than we all do, and then I'll treat them differently. It must be an alien, a mutant or something from another planet, and that's different. But I haven't run into one of them yet. All I'm saying is this: give everybody a fair chance at being successful people in this world, and don't judge them on the fact of them just having autism and or them having any form of special needs and being on the spectrum. I can name you a whole lot of people that run a list long that are revered as very smart folks in this world that are actually on the spectrum. You know, that's a whole nother story, you know, and it's not about shot of shade, it's about an understanding. Joe couldn't have put it more better himself. You know, it's easier for people to tell you to hide that because the norm is not to be that. And that's not right. Joe's an awesome soul. We all awesome souls. Anybody on the spectrum is an awesome soul, and I just expect them to be treated the same. And if everybody operated that way, we watch this world end up being a better way. And I guess so much in so many words, like my daughter Aaliyah would kind of put it. Aaliyah loves people. And if everybody operated like that, I know this world will be a better place. So thank you all for having me, giving the opportunity when you all bring the show back live. I'll say this, I'll put it out there in the universe right now. Tim, you all, you make sure you hit me up, lock me in, and I'll be rocking that poem live with a whole bunch of other stories with you all. You all are the best. We are family. We are one. I love you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jairus. That was there's nothing I can add to that. I think Jairus totally capped it for us in terms of like bringing it home. He even referenced A Quiet Place in his poem, which I love that movie. It's a great movie. I was bummed that Quiet Place 2 got moved because of everything that's happening. But thank you all so much for your stories, for sharing with us. The only things that I want to say is that get to know people in your life who have autism, or find a friend who has autism, or be open to new relationships with new people, and I think that's what this is about. I feel so full right now and alive, and I love it. And I'm thankful for all of our storytellers. This is so sad to me because normally this is the time when we stop the storytelling and everyone has a chance to sort of get together and get to know those who spoke. So if you see the people here, you see their names if you're watching. I know all of them are like, find them on social media, reach out to them. They want to answer questions. They want to keep the conversation going, which we can do digitally. And if you want to get in touch with one of them, you can always reach out to New City Players, of course, on social media, or email Ryan or I. It's just tim@newcityplayers.org or ryan@newcityplayers.org, and we will connect you with our storytellers. But give to Wells Coffee GoFundMe if you haven't. Get to know autistic people in your life and celebrate them, especially this month. Ryan, do you want to show everyone in the gallery grid view so we can all say goodbye before we cancel this broadcast? This broadcast, what is it, the 40s? Are we all on now?
Yes, we are.
Yes.
Okay, everyone say bye.
Bye.
We end with the happy hands.
Why are we all waving?
I don't know. We're happy handing. Good night, everybody. Be safe. Stay at home if you can, and we'll see you soon. Late Show Live starts in 13 minutes. If you want to see me on Instagram Live learning how to cook popcorn, you can do that. Good night.